Folks, if you hate the 30-second countdown, I'm with you. I hate it as well. Too many people screwing around in my StreamYard. So I don't know how to change the settings. All right. That was false start one. Okay. Official start. How confident are you, Buckeyes fans? And how important is this game? Welcome into Buckeyes Live right here at the Voice of College Football. Appreciate you stopping by, of course, for discussion, debate, and analysis with these two. Got Steve Hellwagon right next to me, of course. Bucknuts 247 Sports. Tony Gerdeman down below. BuckeyeHuddle.com is the place to be, as well as the Buckeye Weekly podcast. Guys, how we doing today?
We're doing good. This is the big one. They better win this one or else.
This could be the first win over Penn State that counts for Ryan Day, so it's a big game.
That's how it works when you're expected to win all of them. Oh, you beat a top 5 team. Okay, check that. That didn't really matter. That wasn't a big game. You were supposed to beat them. Okay, on to the next one. That's the burden that he carries.
Yeah,
that's what it is. So you've made this trip a few times, Steve, on out to Happy Valley. It's going to be about as amped as it possibly can be. I know that people, of course, pin that type of atmosphere on the night games, the primetime games, but this is the Fox slot that counts. Big noon in this 12-team format. This is about as big as it can get.
Oh, no doubt. And, number 3 against number 4, there's obviously no other game this weekend that carries the same kind of level of importance, obviously, as Ohio State at Penn State. And I think I've been at every Ohio State, Penn State Big Ten game since 1993, with the exception of 2001, when my wife was pregnant with our daughter, and I did not go to Penn State that day. Penn State came back from a huge deficit and won the game that day, and Joe Paterno set the NCAA wins record. I'm murky on whether he still has all those wins or not. I think they may have restored them. I'm not sure, but at any rate, that was a bit of history that I didn't get to attend. But goodness, what would that be? 30 years. I've probably been there 12 or 14 times. So it's always great to go there for a game. The setting is one of the best in college football. The stadium is always rocking for the big games with Ohio State there. And, Ohio State doesn't really consider Penn State as its rival. It's not a protected rival going forward. After next year, there'll be a 2-year hiatus in the series. 26 and 27, they will not play. And that'll be the first time that they haven't played since Penn State joined the Big Ten. But there is no team right now that Penn State has to beat and needs to beat any more than Ohio State. Ohio State's won the last 6, and James Franklin is 1-9 against Ohio State. And if he loses Saturday, that makes him, what is it, boys and girls? 1-10 against Ohio State. So if there's one team that he is burning above all else to beat, it is the Ohio State University. And of course, Ohio State's got all the incentive on the other side. They lose this game and they could forget about the Big Ten championship game. They're not going to make it. I mean, they wouldn't be mathematically ruled out of it, but for all intents and purposes, they would be ruled out of it, I think. And it'd be really hard to get there with 2 losses. You'd still make the playoff if you can win out. But, man, this promising season is kind of hanging in the balance here on Saturday as Ohio State goes out there to Happy Valley to play Penn State.
I've been asked if this game is there more pressure on Ryan Day or James Franklin with this one? You just threw out all of those records. I think there's more pressure on Ryan Day. He needs it more. Like, he needs it more than James Franklin does. At Penn State, this is not assumed a loss, but it's an understood loss. And right now, Ryan Day has no understood losses on the schedule remaining. And so a ton of pressure on Ohio State and him personally to get this win that against a program that, as I joked about before, doesn't count as a big win for Ryan Day. So now if you start losing the games that don't count as big wins, then that in turn is a big, big loss.
Do you think that there's more pressure on Ryan Day based on what happened against Nebraska last week? Because if we just look at facts and results, then you've got a 1-point loss against the number one team in the country, the most probable loss of the season, still favored to go 11-1. But again, repeat performance from Saturday in Columbus to Happy Valley, and they're sure to get an L number 2.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. That performance against Nebraska has everybody concerned and worried and angry that that kind of performance is not going to get the win against Penn State. And yet, if you watch Penn State at Wisconsin last week, that kind of performance for Penn State this week is not going to get them the win. So you've got two evenly matched dysfunctional programs, offenses and defenses a little bit right now, that are going to slap fight and kick fight and bite fight to see who can come out on top. But yeah, I think if they had gone out and beaten and covered the spread against Nebraska, and then you lose this game, what you're looking at is an Ohio State team that has lost to the number 3 team in the nation twice. That's their 2 losses at this point. The first one was by a point. Who knows what this one would be by, and it is, certainly not a fireable offense by any means. And in a vacuum, you look at it and it's like, well, it's hard to have 2 better losses. And when you're talking about the playoffs, sometimes that's what you're looking at. But this is one that the mood in the program has not been good the last few weeks. I couldn't imagine it being lower if they come out of this game with a loss.
Yeah, it just something just feels off, this year, and I don't know what it is, but the offense played reasonably well at Oregon, well enough to win the game, other than the pass interference penalty and maybe the sack on the last drive. They're in position to win the game. The defense was terrible against Oregon, and then the roles were reversed. The offense was as bad as it's ever been under Ryan Day against Nebraska. Hit 2 big plays, and that's it. I mean, 2 plays, a 60-yard touchdown to Jeremiah Smith, a 40-yard touchdown to Carnell Tate. And otherwise, there was nothing to write home about. 61 yards rushing. That's even less than they had against Missouri in that god-awful Cotton Bowl. And just they created nothing up front. They have injuries galore up front on offense. Josh Simmons is gone for the year at left tackle. They put Zim Mahalski in there for him. He really struggled. And I can't even, I don't like to say negative things about college athletes, but he had one of the worst offensive line performance games that I can recall in recent memory. He was beaten off the jump on 2 of the first 5 plays of the game. He got Howard sacked, and then Howard had to elude the rush and scrambled for a couple yards to avoid a sack. In one series, he gave up a sack where the guy knocked the ball loose from Howard, but Donovan Jackson, I believe, was able to recover it. And I think on the very next play, he and Austin Sierenveld, who had been inserted at right guard for a series in place of Tegra Tushbola, turned both of their guys loose at the snap, and they chase Howard all the way to the Nebraska sideline and eventually sack him for like a 3 or 4 yard loss. I mean, right there's 3 or 4 plays that I've outlined for you that were so bad. The run blocking, they got nothing accomplished up front. And now you go into this game kind of pushing the panic button on the offensive line. And what are you going to do there? We can get into that, the different permutations, the different rotations you could go with. But the defense, the one positive thing that came out of the game was that they actually played a pretty good game after being flamed for 2 weeks for playing horribly against Oregon. It was almost spot on against Nebraska. I think they gave up 1 touchdown, a 2-point conversion, and 3 field goals for 17 points. Yeah. So not a bad day. Of course, Nebraska's offense is not going to be confused with the 1921 Yankees. They can't do much of anything offensively. Raiola showed tremendous potential down the line, but he needs better players around him, I think, to survive and flourish there. I thought Cody Simon played a great game. Caleb Downs had a really good performance in that game as well. So they want to build off of that one. And they did sack Raiola 3 times. I think it was Tui Maloau. Tyleik Williams had one early, and Ty Hamilton as well. They want to build off of that defensive performance and put that on the field this week against Penn State. That'll give them a chance to win this game.
Yeah, and you'll see different fronts like you did again in this one, and they'll continue to be attacking. They'll just have to make sure that they don't let Bo Prabula get out and get loose like Dylan Raiola did. And that comes back to fundamentals and gap integrity and things like that. And if they can get Lathan Ransom back, which is a possibility, then that will make them a more sound defense in the back end. Jalen McClain, true freshman, last week got the start, played well, but had some mistakes in there, missed tackle. I think another coverage bust that kind of led to the 37-yard scramble from Raiola. So if they can get Ransom back, then that would make the defense even better. The Zen Michalski, if talking to Ryan Day yesterday, they're going to see how he looks this week. I'd be shocked if he plays, because we were on the sideline, standing on the sideline while he was walking past us, being helped past us, and he was in a lot of pain, then had to be carted off and wasn't walking under his own power at all. So it's hard for me to imagine you go from that to being good enough to play and start and get reps in this game. And then Ryan Day said, if he can go, he'll start. And I asked him, basically, so to just kind of repeat that, like, if he's healthy, he's going to start. And he's like, yeah, he would be. And then later on, somebody else asked, like, are you sure? He's like, well, we'd still have to work it out and make sure that he's good to go. They're trying to get him to work through this stuff, but they've certainly seen a different player in practice, I would assume, than what we've seen in that game, because it's hard to imagine that they would choose to, like Steve, I don't like to pick on players. It's hard to imagine they would choose to go with him again based on the performance that he had last week. I think at some point you've got to start looking at a different idea, a different plan. And the fact that they had a bye week and that's what they came up with is concerning. And was that the easiest answer, even though it may not have been the best answer? They were hoping it was the best answer because you're just moving one guy, whereas now you're going to be moving more than one guy. You're probably putting Donovan Jackson at left tackle, then you're putting somebody else at left guard, whether that's Luke Montgomery, Carson Hinsman, Austin Sierveld. They've still got some things to work out, and there are more moving parts, so I think they're trying to limit the moving parts. But, man, seeing how things went on Saturday, it's hard to imagine that they went well during the week, the 2 weeks of practice. And if they did, then is that an indictment of the Ohio State pass rushing as well? And then lastly, I think what is more concerning, that this is was the best option, or that it wasn't, and now they've got a week to get everything fixed for Penn State.
Yeah, I'm completely dumbfounded by his comments yesterday about, if Michalski is healthy, that they would still trot him out there in a number 4 versus number 3 game against guys like Abdul Carter and some of the guys that Penn State has. I'm just aghast. I think, yeah, good enough to beat Kent State, good enough to beat Illinois, or good enough to beat Rutgers or, whoever, but this is Penn State. And I know, a 5-star offensive tackle is not going to fall out of the sky, but man, I think Donovan Jackson's a pretty good football player. I'd give him a shot out there to see what he can do. Maybe he isn't big enough to play tackle. I don't know, but Tegra Shabola's got the size, but does he have the athleticism? I don't know, to go against the speed rusher. But Michalski was a fish out of water, it looked like to me, last week against Nebraska. And I don't know how that works, especially if he's not 100%. If he's got some kind of a ankle, knee, leg tweak of some sort, I just don't know how that works out. So that's my thought. And I want to see Ryan Montgomery, or rather Luke Montgomery. We haven't seen him yet in a game really when it's been on the line this year. He played the last few plays last week. You watch the press conferences and you just kind of scratch your head. I guess the one question I would have had for Chip Kelly was, that they blow up these plays, the defense does, and they pan to him in the press box, and he's just cool, calm, and collected, get ready to make the call on 3rd and 11, after they've blown up, 2 plays in a row, and he just rolls with the punches, and that's all you can do. And, Ohio State was 1 of 10 on 3rd down. If you had told me they were going to go 1 of 10 on 3rd down and still win the game, I wouldn't have believed it. Of course, they only won the game by 4 points. They were favored by 25. So, I think that line was a little bit out of whack based on the 56-7 that Nebraska had experienced the week before against Indiana. But to me, I don't think Kelly called a great game, and certainly the players didn't execute it, whatever it was they were trying to do down there.
And that 1 of 10 has been the big issue. And so rewatching it, I'm like, did they just get stuffed a lot on 1st down? Were there a lot of empty 1st downs? And I went through, and they ran the ball 11 times on 1st down. They threw it 8, which is fine, but they got good yards on 1st down. Here's what they got on their, I think, 19 1st down attempts: 8, -1, 15, 8, 6, 40, 4, 9, 17, 4, 2. There's an interception, 2 yards, 8, 37, 3, 7, 9, 1. So there's not a lot of zeros, not a lot of negatives, plenty of, getting things started off on a good foot. You want 4 yards, at least 4 yards on 1st down. And they got that the majority of the time, and just couldn't finish the 2nd and the short yardage 3rd downs. I think they need to get back to the sneak, because that was working for them, even when the refs did shortchange them 2 yards on one of the Will Howard sneaks after the goal line stand. But when you go 1 for 10 on 3rd down, you're going to have a lack of plays, and they did in this one. They were under 50 total offensive plays for the 3rd time this decade. Last time was 2021 against Minnesota, and the time before that was Michigan State 2015, to give you an idea. And so even if they go –
that was a good one.
Yeah, even if they convert half of their 1st downs, you're talking about at least another 12 plays at the minimum, and who knows what goes on from there.
Yeah. I mean, they talked about how if you're a winning operation at the end, they got the ball back. They forced a punt, like 4 minutes to go. And he's like, well, we should be in our 4-minute offense where you pick up a couple 1st downs and get in the victory formation. And he said that, and people pointed it out immediately. Well, then you've got to call plays that are going to win, because they ran 2 Judkins run plays for like 1 yard and then threw underneath the sticks. Didn't even throw beyond the sticks to try and get the 1st down. It's like, you want to be in your 4-minute offense and you want to do well, but you've also got to call plays that are going to win. I mean, certainly in that situation, Nebraska knows you're going to run the ball on 1st and 2nd down, because you want the clock to run. You want Nebraska to use its timeouts. And so Nebraska stacked against the run and stuffed those plays. Now, I get Day's dissatisfaction that you weren't able to get at least 4 yards, on those 2 running plays, which would have set up a 3rd and short where you could have done anything in the playbook, to convert that for a 1st down. But to me, it kind of falls back on his thing that we as coaches have to put them in the best position to win. And I think he talked out of both sides of his mouth on that one. He wanted success in the 4-minute offense, but didn't give them a plan for success. So, they did the prudent thing. They made Nebraska burn their timeouts. But, coming back, Nebraska, after the targeting penalty, which, we can debate that till the cows come home. Thankfully, 3 days later, sanity has prevailed, and the Big Ten has rescinded the targeting call on Arvell Reese, approved the appeal, and he will be eligible for the entire game this week against Penn State. But that doesn't do you any good in the interim, because a fumble was created. Ohio State recovered it, and that was wiped off the board. And that would have been the football game. I mean, that would have been it, if Ohio State got to keep possession. Instead, the ball was moved to the 40-yard line, and Raiola in his youth on 3rd down just kind of threw it up for grabs and gave Ohio State the game. Jordan Hancock was the easy recipient of a sliding interception, just playing center field There wasn't a receiver anywhere near him. And Raiola just kind of panicked with the football in his hands and just put it up for grabs. And Hancock with like 106 left. I mean, it was deep in the 59th minute before Ohio State had secured this win where they were favored by 3.5 touchdowns. So, no, it was not a good day at the Horseshoe, not any way, shape, or form.
Steve, you talk about not throwing to the sticks on that drive. They didn't even throw to the line of scrimmage. It was a 7-yard loss on a little toss swing to Travion Henderson. And part of me understands you've got a new left tackle, new left side of the offensive line in there at that point. So you want to punt or whatever. But yeah, they showed no confidence in the left side of the line on that last third down play. When you've got a 5th-year senior quarterback, you've got veteran receivers, you should be able to just go and try to pick up a first down. This one was just, let's just not throw an interception. Let's not get sacked. Let's not fumble, and let's punt it back and leave it up to the defense. And okay.
Yeah, I know the offensive line was a disaster, but yeah, you throw that thing to Travion Henderson, and he's starting 5 yards behind the line of scrimmage. And I know the guy's good, but he's facing like 6 guys in front of him that are coming right at him versus you can't trust the offensive line to hold up for a 3-step drop and a slant to somebody. Right. Yeah, the best weapons in the country.
It's a mess. I think we saw Ohio State on defense trigger with Burke and Downs against those screens and blow them up. I think Burke had 2 tackles for loss, which is outstanding for a corner. He read it perfectly, the veteran that he is. He had a great bounce-back game, I thought. He did give up an early pass play that was negated by a Nebraska penalty, I believe, as I recall. But let me see. My point
I think it was a reversal, right?
What's that? It was reversed. It was, they called it an incomplete pass upon forensic review of the videotape, which is interesting. I don't think those screens will be there this week against Penn State. Penn State's got a great defense, and they're going to trigger against those screens. Ohio State loves to throw them, blocks them pretty well. The first play of the game, they threw the ball to Carnell Tate. He had a great angle, made a guy miss at the line of scrimmage and got 8 or 9 yards. And then, as Tony was saying, they don't convert for the first down and had to punt it away. I mean, it was just a comedy of errors on offense for Ohio State. Did they give it up on downs on the first series or the second? First series, wasn't it? Maybe it was the second. Might have been the second. But at any rate, they certainly didn't score on either of the first 2 possessions. And
first series.
It was the first series. Okay. First series after that 8 or 9 yard gain on first down, they had 3 more cracks and couldn't pick up the 2 yards. So that's a serious issue there. And, I don't think those screens will be there against Penn State, which takes out the first 5 pages of the Ohio State playbook. So, and you can't run inside with this offensive line. That takes out the next 4 pages of the Ohio State playbook. So now what you gonna do, when Penn State and the 100,000 Nittany Maniacs are raining down on you? What's going to happen?
Well, one of the things Wisconsin was able to do is throw on Penn State and do it effectively, but they had like 6 drops. They had some receivers that were open. They did some RPO stuff that was effective. So that might be what Ohio State does as well. Throw to run if you can't run to run.
It could be a pretty ugly football game if you love offense with all the weapons that this team has, just because
it was 20-12 last year. It was in Columbus. It was 20. Exactly. It was a terrible game. 20-12. I mean, Ohio State, neither team rushed for more than like 60 or 70 yards last year's game. It was ridiculous. So we're looking at the same thing, I think, pretty much. I don't see either offense running away and hiding with this one.
I know Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson aren't perfect, but I know they're better than 2.7 yards per carry between the 2 of them. So when the most talked about player on the team is an offensive lineman, that's obviously a bad thing. And then on top of it, man, I'm an educated football fan. I've watched a ton, but I will not elevate myself anywhere close to a scout or a coach watching these games. But man, my eyes were drawn right to that left tackle position over and over and over and over. You talk about guys that jump off the screen, it's usually in a positive way. And again, I hate to disparage because of what you guys mentioned, his injury at this point. But yeah, the Zen Mahalski performance, of course. And that when you've got weaknesses on either side of the ball, this is the one that impacts the most. The defensive line can cover up for the linebackers and so forth and so on. You have a default when there are weaknesses everywhere else. But when it's the offensive line and you've got arguably the best weapons in the country, then they're void and useless to a certain extent if you're number one completely changing the playbook because you have no confidence in number two. You can't get the quarterback the ball out of his hands in time.
And Penn State's they've got an injured right tackle who has been in and out, and they've been putting in a backup in there as well. So like they've got issues on the offensive line, but they're still working through it. For this to just completely derail Ohio State is that's not a good sign of the recruiting and the development and all of those things. And yeah, I asked Chip Kelly yesterday, like, what's the common denominator with the lack of running? And he's like, well, sometimes it's this and sometimes it's that, and sometimes it's this and sometimes it's something different. I'm like, well, does that make you feel better or worse if it's something different every time? He's like, you don't feel good about any of it. But I think it's a bad sign when sometimes it's this and sometimes it's that, then sometimes it's this over there, and then this time it's that. It's none of it is acceptable at Ohio State or even at Boise State or Savannah State. Is there a Savannah State? Dixie State, whatever.
Steve, I'm tired of you comparing this defense to the 2000 Ravens. I've heard you say this several times now.
Now, I guess to clarify, I think we were talking about Penn State's defense at that point. I think that's what he was talking about.
Oh, okay.
I mean, just my comment about them blowing up the screens and whatever. I mean, Penn State did give up 30 points to USC and, won that game in overtime, 33-30 out at the Coliseum. That was good. They gave up 27 points to what's turning out to be a very good Bowling Green team. They thumped Toledo to kind of become the ruler of the roost in the MAC this past weekend. So, I don't think there's a disgrace in either of those. But by and large, they've slammed the car door shut on everybody else. It says right here in my handy dandy notes that Penn State's fourth in the NCAA in total defense and eighth in scoring defense, 14 points a game. And I think that they've played roughly the same schedule Ohio State has. I mean, they played West Virginia in the non-conference, which is better than anything Ohio State played. They played Illinois, which is one ranked team. They haven't played anybody nearly as good as Oregon. They went on the road to Wisconsin, which was a good win. On the road to USC, which, 500 team, whatever. But, I'm not trying to say that this Penn State defense is even the best one that their school's ever had. I mean, you think about all the great defensive guys that they've had, linebackers, defensive ends, even defensive backs in the last 15 years. They've had, any number of all Big Ten, All-American type guys at Penn State during this Big Ten tenure of the last 30 years. But it's a good Penn State defense, and I think they're going to, the one point I heard one commentator make was this game could look a lot like the Nebraska game for Ohio State, where you hit one or two big plays with your freak athletes, but you have no consistency to hang your hat on. So if you can get to 24 points, maybe you feel pretty good about it because your defense has been playing, at least the last game, the Ohio State defense played very good football. So they need to carry that over in the worst way possible in this game.
Ryan Dawes, thank you so much for the super chat. We will get to your question here just in a second as we transition from offense to defense. In the meantime, we'd like to highlight our Monday night 9 p.m. Eastern Time show where you get to call JR and talk Buckeyes. JR, how you doing?
Doing great. Thanks for being here.
Absolutely. Where's your confidence level?
Oh, I just wrote an article the other day about panic level. I'm still not super panicked right now, but I did pick Penn State to win this game, so I guess it's on one of those levels where if Ohio State doesn't improve, they're going to lose. But we've seen improvement, and Ohio State has been historically bad. Not just Ohio State. Ryan Day has been historically bad coming out of the bye week, so I'm hanging my hat on that a little bit. I'll be on that massive panic level if they lose this one to Penn State.
Okay. Because as I understood that, Ohio State's going to lose the game, but you're just not going to be panicked about it.
Apathy has set in.
If history proves itself that Ryan Day struggles in the bye week, but then he comes after that, I'm trying to remain a level head. Then yeah, I'm kind of all over the place if you can't tell.
If I could have my perfect scenario to play out this season, just to witness the mayhem on social media, it would be Ohio State losing this game, I don't know, like 38-3, and then coming back as a 8 seed to win the national championship. That's what I would love to witness.
If they get into the playoffs with 2 losses, I think they probably do. But yeah, they wouldn't really have a huge win to hang their hat on. Indiana, if they have 2 losses, would probably be that big win. Thanks to the team up north, they wouldn't really be an impressive win this year.
What goes on with this show of yours on Monday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern time right here?
Just talking Ohio State, it's a good time. We kind of recap the game a little bit, but then you're also looking forward to the next game. So we had a good amount of Justin Fry talk. Our guy David Greenshield was on there talking about that. We also had a lot of Nebraska talk and what went wrong, and then we had a Penn State fan actually show up, and he gave some of his thoughts. Very respectable, very good guy, and we had a really nice discussion there. So you can kind of get everything on that Monday night show there.
There
and
you
of
go.
course, you
Mondays
can call
at
in
9.
and share your thoughts as well. So
I think you make a really good point that we've watched Ohio State play 7 games, and they played a slew of games at the beginning against teams. I haven't checked Marshall's record or, I haven't followed up on all these teams that they played, but a lot of really bad teams, and Iowa's just kind of meh. They're going to end up with their usual 8 or 9 wins, whatever. But Michigan State probably going to end up, they might get to 6, who knows. But it really hasn't, for 4 quarters, it just hasn't clicked in for Ohio State, at least against a quality opponent and or even a quasi-quality opponent. So Iowa's probably the closest thing that they've had to playing a good game against a decent enough team. And you have to hesitate before you pick Ohio State to just go on the road and beat Penn State because they haven't put together a full 4-quarter game against, a good opponent yet. And I think I just keep coming back to something's missing, something just isn't clicking there. And you wish that it was, but it's just the way it is.
And it just seems to be the sore spot along the offensive line. That is the last place that you want a sore spot besides maybe quarterback. In my estimation, I just think that's the place that cannot be, that just impacts so much more than any other spot. Subpar linebacker play for a few years. They got by without that, still had a top defense much of that time, et cetera, et cetera. But offensive line.
Yeah, this will be my last thing I say, and then I'll leave you guys to it. I just think it's funny because we did talk about it a little bit on the show Monday, how Ohio State basically went from, with Josh Simmons having a top 5 offensive line in the country, at worst top 10. I mean, it really was one of the best in the country. Of course, they hadn't played anybody spectacular, but they performed pretty well against Oregon after Josh Simmons went out. And now after this Nebraska game, we're at the point where we're all like, the offensive line is terrible and it can never be fixed, and the world is falling, and I do have some pessimism there about that, but I also have the hope that maybe it was just one bad game. We'll see this Saturday.
All right, JR. Thanks for stopping by. We'll see you post game and then next Monday at 9 p.m. Eastern time.
Thanks, guys. See you.
All right. Ryan.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead,
One thing I've been kind of trying to mention to people is Urban Meyer had two teams at Ohio State where he had defensive tackles or defensive linemen starting at right tackle, twice, Chase Ferris and Darrell Baldwin. So it's, these things happen in terms of trying to find stuff on the offensive line. And, they won a national championship with one and not another with the other. So
transitioning to the defense, James Franklin pulled what was pretty much coaching 101 in preparation for a big opponent and keeping them guessing in terms of whether Drew Aller's going to be ready or Bo Prabula, who played, of course, in the second half against Wisconsin rather well and sees meaningful snaps against big opponents because he is the runner that has a couple packages in play for him. So Ryan is asking, and we appreciate the super chat. Ryan, will the Ohio State defense be able to handle Prabula's running ability if he starts over the injured Drew Aller?
I think the good news for Ohio State is they were going to have to prepare for him regardless of Drew Aller's injury. So this is something that Penn State does, and they'll have to handle it. It's really, really difficult to match up with a quarterback that can run on the reads, and it's designed that way. But I think the other issue is that when you look at the Wisconsin game, they averaged in the first half with mainly Aller in, they did not run the ball well. And then Prabula comes in and everybody runs the ball well. And so that is, to me, the biggest concern is not just him, but what it does for the rest of the running game as well. And so I think he elevates everything, and he completed like 11 of 13 passes. So, he got away with a couple of passes in there, but to me, I think he is the more dangerous guy than Drew Aller, the way I see it, because he can do more. And he may not be as accurate as Aller, but how dangerous is Aller downfield? I don't know. We've talked about that over the last year or so. Like, what kind of threat does he pose downfield? It's never been a threat. They've got some good receivers. They've got their good tight end, Tyler Warren. They'll get him the ball everywhere. But I think Prabula is going to be a difficult stop for the Buckeyes in this one.
Your assessment, Steve, of the Ohio State defense preparing for running quarterback. I'm trying to think if they really well. Aiden Childs, of course.
Dylan Gabriel.
Yeah, Gabriel ate their lunch up with that touchdown. That was, and the guy sitting next to me, I think I made this point a couple weeks ago. He was a national college football guy, and he goes, "It's about time that he keeps it on this." And sure enough, he did. And the Red Sea parted. 5 different Buckeyes took terrible angles, and the next thing you know, he's celebrating a touchdown in the end zone. So, your quarterback can run. It changes so much, and that maybe we'll see Howard on the other side finally tuck it and get 50 yards for Ohio State. What would those 50 yards mean if Howard's able to do that for Ohio State? But the Buckeyes did give up a long run here to Raiola the other day, and it was when they invited the blitz, and he, like a veteran, stepped up forward and saw nothing but green field turf in front of him, green, awful field turf in front of him, so green, slippery, awful field turf in front of him, and took off running and, picked up 30-some yards. So, a play like that flips the field, and it just demoralizes the defense because you think you have brought the blitz and you have hemmed him in and you've got him. You're thinking negative play, and instead it's a 35-yard gain, and you're like, damn, they're in the red zone. We got it now. Now shit's real. We've got to buck, batten down the hatches here. And by and large, Ohio State did that against Nebraska. Had a goal line stand at the 1-yard line, which was terrific. Held them to 3 field goals when of course, one of those was right on the last play of the half when everybody in the stadium knows they're going to throw underneath, take the 8 yards to get back into field goal range, and then kick the field goal. And they did it. They executed it to perfection. So, I want to see more of that from the Ohio State defense. I want to see more things that make sense. I want to see him put guys like Simon and Downs and Styles in position to make plays. So that's what I want to see.
All right, folks, just released here on Tuesday, Disputed National Champions. It's my look at the 1990s, which I consider to be the most formative decade in college football in regards to changing the championship formula of the game. So we went from strictly the polls to the bowl coalition, guaranteeing to a certain extent a 1 versus 2 matchup on into the BCS, which of course was the precursor for the playoff era. So this is not just a history book, but it starts there in regards to storylines, scenarios, major players each season toward the national championship race, the rankings, who got left out, was the vote valid, all of those things. What was the aftermath? What was the trajectory of these coaches and programs following that particular season? And then we play it forward. We take all those results from each season and we project it forward and place it into the BCS model, what it would have looked like, into the 14 playoff model, into the 12 team, into the proposed 14 team playoff model, which is a lot of fun, especially when you consider hardly any of these teams are in the same conference now. So there's a lot of adjustment for realignment as well.
I like it.
The night is this 91? Is this, like you say, the 90s? Is it mid 90s? When do you start?
We go 1990 all through 99.
So how many of John Cooper's teams make the 4-team and the 12-team playoff?
That is, well, certainly 1996.
93
did.
Probably
93.
One loss.
Did they make a? Yeah, that's a great
one
question.
loss, one tie. 94 they had.
Yeah, they wouldn't have made it.
94 they had 3. They were 99-3 in the regular season, I think, in 94.
But 95, 96, 97, 98 should all be in there.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
yeah, all those.
So
5 of the 10 years.
You go to 1993, they would have been the 6th seed.
92, they would have been borderline.
I had to project a Big Ten championship. So
in 92, they would have been borderline.
We had 7 major conferences in 1993 because we had the ACC, the Big 8, the Big East, the SEC, the Southwest Conference, and the Big 10 and the Pac-10. So they would have been the 6th of 7 seeds in 1993 at 9-1-1.
Wow. Who'd they host?
They would have hosted, doesn't this work out? Or would have been kind of boring and anticlimactic. They would have hosted Wisconsin as the 11th seed.
That was a good Wisconsin team in 93 too, right?
That they tied.
They tied. Marlon Kerner blocked the field goal.
Big Ten championship game redux.
Yeah.
1995, they're the 9 seed at 11-1.
Wow.
Yeah, they didn't win the Big Ten. Northwestern won the Big Ten.
And then, of course, you get some clunky conference champions from like the likes of the ACC. They get one of those top seeds as, 8-3 or whatever it is. Absolutely.
Yeah. The 90s, you had the TV for the regular season changed in the mid 80s to where each conference could, auction off their rights and all that. It wasn't part of that, NCAA artificial limit of 3 games a year or whatever. And that in many regards is what's changed the sport, but even in the early 90s, they weren't fully monetizing all of those. Like every game wasn't on television until about 95, at least in the Big Ten. Until about 95, you got up to where about 90% of the games were now on television by the mid 90s. And to me, that is one area where college athletics, began to transition from, front door of your university to a television show. So, that, and we know what the ramifications of that are now 25, 30 years later on what's, you had the Big Ten Network came on, in 2007, you replaced the middleman, the ESPN regional, Raycom, Jefferson Pilot, all that crap, you replaced that syndication with bringing it in-house, with SEC Network, Big Ten Network, ACC Network, and monetizing, all that for the schools. So the big pot of gold wasn't trying to make it to a $10 million bowl game anymore. It was, well, we already made our money, that's just extra, whatever they give us there at the end. So.
Well, forget endorsements out of you. Look at this one. Mika, thank you so much. Just ordered the book. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoy it. Give me some feedback as well. And it was a whole lot of fun. I've never written a book before, and people, I know you have, Steve, in particular, and people ask, how difficult it was. Well, it was jumping through all the hoops of formats and marketing and covers and all that. It wasn't writing the book, and I don't propose myself as a great writer, probably a better writer than a broadcaster, but so I can write. It was basically combing through all these scenarios and making sure I was consistent from scenario to scenario, year to year, because I'd get through it and then I'd have to rethink it and say, no, yep. I didn't use that same process 3 years ago. No, I got to go back through, because it's pretty complicated, these scenarios, when you try to throw them into the future in a completely different college football landscape. In terms of what would have happened. Of course, there were no conference championships. So that's another thing. I line up all the would-be conference championship games.
And people love to tell you if you've done something wrong. So you got to make sure you're consistent and all that. And I will check it out, but I got to run. So we'll see you guys next week.
Thanks, Tony.
You got to report on this thing with the college football playoff. Like, what's it all about? Look forward to hearing about it.
Yep. See you guys.
Thanks, Tony.
I look at it and, I think that each year it's kind of apples to oranges. Like you kind of said, you go from having, you consider the Big East and the Southwest as, quote, major conferences. And under this current format, only the top 4 ranked college, or rather conference champions, are going to get those first 4 byes. ESPN on one of their sports centers last night matted up what the top 12 would look like. And, based off this week's AP poll. And the first thing was there's a tie at like number 11 with Iowa State and Clemson are tied at number 11, the AP poll. And it just so happened, because I believe Boise State is the current highest ranked group of 5 champion at like 15, that they get in as the 12 seed under this scenario. And so they had to put it up on the graphic that the 11 seed is either Iowa State or Clemson, and that the first team out is either Iowa State or Clemson. And Indiana, which is completely misranked down at number 13 in the AP poll, is like the second team out. That Indiana wouldn't be in the according to the AP poll, Indiana wouldn't be in the 12-team playoff today, which I find completely ludicrous. Pittsburgh is also woefully underrated wherever they are. But again, it's all going to come out in the wash. I mean, I believe there's 4 teams that are undefeated still in ACC play, if I'm not mistaken, with Miami, Clemson, SMU, and Pittsburgh, I think, are all still undefeated. None of them have played each other yet, and there'll probably be a couple of those matchups. Pittsburgh and SMU are playing this week, I believe, correct? Does that sound right?
So, Steve, there's a possibility that there could be a 3-way tie and all 3 teams did not play and are undefeated in the conference. Clemson, Miami, and SMU do not play. Can you imagine that scenario?
Yeah, I had a friend or somebody note that, and they said SMU will look at, at the ACC office and look at Miami and say, Clemson can have our spot. If we win the tiebreaker, just give it to Clemson. They deserve it. They've got the pedigree. Let Dabo. We'll take our. Are they 11-1? Did they lose a game somewhere?
Lost to BYU by a field goal.
Yeah, to BYU. they'll just say, they those guys can have the spot. We'll just take our playoff spot. We don't want to go play Miami. So
What about this situation, Steve? Let's say that happens. All three run the table, which is unlikely, but still, they're all three going to be favorites the rest of the way. Except maybe this SMU game against Pitt, although I believe they're at home for that game, so they should be a favorite. Let's say Clemson beats Miami in the ACC championship game. Miami goes into that game undefeated. So they lose the ACC title game. They're 12-1. Clemson's the auto bid. They're 12-1. SMU sitting at home at 11-1 with a loss to BYU, who might be the Big 12 champion, by a field goal. And they had an undefeated record in the conference and weren't allowed to go to the championship game. If you leave one of those teams out, wow, I don't know who you leave out, number one, or does the ACC get all three teams in?
Boy, it's going to be difficult. I think, I guess it just depends how the rest of the other conferences, the Big Ten and, the SEC, will they continue to beat up on each other every week and stack second and third losses on some of those top teams? I think that's what the determiner will be. You can't justify like a 3-loss LSU getting in over a 1-loss SMU, I wouldn't think, just as an example. So, and there's so much more football. We're 9 weeks into this, and there are still 5 regular season games and the conference championship games yet to be played. And so many of the top teams will be playing each other down the stretch or in the championship games. So, I'm a firm believer that you can't really penalize somebody who makes the championship game and loses. If they were ranked ahead of a team before that, it's kind of hard to, put them below that team after a loss to a better team, if that's what it comes down to. But, we probably will see some of that bias creep in there depending on the league. And, they will use one criteria to support the Blue Bloods and another criteria to, as my buddy Jeff Rapp used to say on Selection Sunday, channeling his best Dick Vitale, you got to screw the small schools, so I think that's probably what we'll probably see.
And what makes that scenario, Steve, different for me than your typical tiebreaker at the top of a conference is that, number one, there's an auto bid to the playoff, unlike previous seasons. Number two, this is a league that's most likely only to get one bid into the playoffs. And number three, it's one thing to say, yeah, we went 6-2 and there's a 3-way tie for first place, and therefore we got screwed out of going to the ACC or in any conference championship game. But it's another thing to say, we're 8-0. What else were we supposed to do? We couldn't do anything else. We were given this schedule, and it projects. The reason I highlight SMU is because they project to have the worst schedule in the conference. Therefore, they would lose the tiebreaker with Clemson and Miami to get into the ACC championship game. But that was the schedule they were given.
Yep. Hey, let's just wrap this up with thoughts on this game.
Yes.
Just what do you think that we're in for here? I mean, the over-under is like 45, 46, something like that. And OSU's favored 3.5. I kind of feel like it may go under, to be honest with you, but unless there's some big plays, unless the defense is completely collapsed. I don't know. What do you think?
I think that if everything's working the way it should, that Ohio State's a better football team, a more talented team than Penn State, certainly a more explosive team, regardless of what we see in the explosive play rate, where Penn State has increased significantly this year in that way. So the new offensive coordinator from Kansas has certainly fixed some things for them. To Tony's point, Ohio State should be prepared for Bo Prabula regardless in that facet of the offense. But my goodness, if that offensive line, they were facing a good defense against Nebraska, solid defense, but they're going to be facing such a better front and more athletic defense with more NFL players for Penn State that wow, when you eliminate the best players on the field, meaning for Ohio State, you can't get the ball in good position with some space for guys like Judkins and Henderson and Smith and Ibuka and all those guys, that this is their calling card. This is what makes them one of the big favorites to win the national championship, is that they have the best weapons in the country. So they better have a serviceable offensive line performance.
Yeah. A lot of people are still celebrating Halloween this weekend. You know, it's kind of, I mean, you really get 2 weekends of it if you counted last weekend, and then, you know, the actual day is tomorrow, and then Friday, it goes right into a weekend. So there'll probably be some people, you know, still doing parties and stuff this weekend, but Ohio State needs to let the freaks come out. You know, that's the big thing. And you know, that includes Henderson. You got to get Henderson in space, because like Notre Dame last year was this kind of game, and he turned it on a dime, you know, with that 60-yard run to start the second half. You know, one blink of an eye, you know, you were like, whoa, what was that? You know, and they blocked it to perfection. The wide receivers out in front of him sold out for him, and he was gone, you know, in the blink of an eye. So that's what Ohio State has to have. They've got to have 2 of those type, just change the field position, change the game type plays. If they do, then I like their chances. Them going on the road didn't work out real well at Oregon. They had a bunch of false starts and, you know, just didn't handle it very well. It's going to be every bit as loud, if not louder, at Penn State with double the number of people. You know, there were only like 60,000 people there. I guess not quite double, but, you know, 108,000 or whatever it'll be at Penn State. And even though it's a noon game, you know, it'll be loud. I mean, this is the season for both these teams. And certainly for Ohio State, it is. You lose this game and it's just kind of like, well, come home beating Indiana and, you know, hope we get in at 10-2 and try and make the best of that. Maybe you'll get a home game out of that. I don't know. But, yeah, to me, you know, to have so much invested, you know, $20 million worth of coaches, $20 million worth of players, and this has been the end result through 7 games. Is a little bit underwhelming, I think. So I think that they need to put it all together here at some point. And it's kind of like 2015. Yeah, we know how good you are. You showed us last year how great you are, but you know, really, if we're going to regard your 2015 team as anything, you need to go out and show us this year. And really, to this point, they haven't. So it's time to put up or shut up time for Ohio State.
I really think you've hit on the most likely formula. It's not going to be pretty 8-play 75-yard drives where you're getting 8, 12, 9, 6, 15.
-2.
No,
Incomplete pass.
It's going to be 3 and out, 4 and out, and then Jeremiah Smith for 60. It's probably going to be that. It's going to be 4 or 5 plays, and the rest of the offensive game plan and look is going to look ugly. But it's going to be special players making about 4 or 5 plays in this game that's most likely going to do it. I think you've hit on it.
Yeah, I'm excited. We're going to Bedford on Friday, which is I live here on the east side of Columbus. It's about 3.5 hours to Bedford across the turnpike there, and then 90 minutes up to State College. Just got a text that Penn State is now not expecting Donald Trump to attend this game. I think they all realize that the security hurdles were a bit much with 110,000 people and traffic and everything else. You can't secure an area like that, knowing what's around that stadium. I think it's almost impossible to secure him getting in and out of there, even if he did sit in the suites on the east side of the stadium and was kind of tucked away in a suite. I just don't think that for the campaign, what kind of juice are you going to get out of that? And I don't know. It just doesn't look like that'll be a hurdle that we're going to have to jump through this week. Everyone was worried about having their cars stopped and searched on the way in and everything else. It doesn't look like maybe that'll be what happens, one way or the other. So
we understand there's a few votes in the Keystone State that may be pivotal. So that
vote early and vote often.
There.
Vote early and vote often.
All right, folks. Appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football for Buckeyes Live. Make it on back next Wednesday. Steve, enjoy your trip. Hopefully it's a good one.
Yep, we're looking forward to it.